This course, we're going to talk about situational law enforcement. What are our objectives? We're going to analyze the basic duties of an officer, the effectiveness of an officer, the concept of duty in a healthcare facility. We're going to define situational law enforcement. We are also going to define voluntary compliance. And the last point that we will consider is the factors in situational law enforcement. Beginning with the basic duties of an officer is to maintain order. And here we have an acronym, the word order. O being to observe, R is to report, D, documentation, E, explain to the person if necessary, and R, we must respond to their questions. And this will help us to maintain order. In the effectiveness of an officer, think in the acronym SACRED, the integrity of an officer. S, as for the security. A, awareness, being alert. When we get to letter C, we have competence. The officer must fulfill his duties with competency. R is responsibility. And E, enthusiasm. Be joyful while fulfilling your duties. And D, have the desire to assist. Among the concept of duty, here comes the officer's demeanor. He should be nice. Another acronym. B would be benevolent, a good person. E, entice the person. When you talk with a person, they may feel free to express themselves with the officer. And we have to notice, give notification of what is going on in the situation. I is for insight. We have to see beyond what we see what is in front of us in that situation. C requires comprehension of what's going on. And letter E, empathy. Always put ourselves in the person's situation. Now entering situational law enforcement, how do we define it? Situational law enforcement is to exercise the officer's authority considering the circumstances surrounding a minor violation. Therefore, the officer will enforce the violated law or rule through orientation or instructions seeking voluntary compliance. But now that we mentioned voluntary compliance, what is voluntary compliance? It's the process of correcting a wrongdoing where the person on their own free will follows the officer's instructions. And this is done through persuasion. In all intervention, our primary goal is voluntary compliance. What are the factors that we have to consider in situational law enforcement? First, the seriousness of the offense. Second, which was the intent of the offender. Third, what is the offender's attitude? And fourth, special circumstances. Why did he or she act in a certain manner? What were the circumstances that led them to act in such a manner? In situational law enforcement, we have to see if the violation was common. We have another acronym. In common, C, did the person violate a rule because he was careless? O, was it oversight, did not see maybe a sign that was posted? Is it M, was the person misinformed? Or the other M, was there a misunderstanding? We also have the other O, which would be obvious. The instructions were obvious, but the person just did not pay attention to those instructions. And finally, N, was the person negligent? In situational law enforcement, this involves considering all the circumstances surrounding each violation. The use of common sense on behalf of the officer will help him use proper judgment. The decisions must be fair and consistent. You can't take one decision with one person in the same situation, maybe decide in another manner. We have to analyze totally that whole situation. It must be absence of prejudice, vengeful, or an overbearing attitude. You cannot escalate a minor infraction into a major or a serious infraction. And remember always, the primary goal is voluntary compliance.